live. And Stephen, just remember just to give the room a minute or so to kind of fill in. And we will be live in 3, 2, 1. We are live.
I can begin now?
Yes, you may.
Okay. Welcome to this evening's forum. Tonight, you will be hearing from Ray Curry and Sean Fain, the two candidates for international president in the union's runoff election. I'm honored to serve as moderator for this forum for the United Auto Workers, which has long been one of the nation's greatest unions. My name is Steve Greenhouse. I'm a retired New York Times reporter. I covered labor for the Times for nearly 2 decades, and I even wrote a book with several chapters about the UAW. I'm currently a senior fellow at the Century Foundation. Before we begin tonight's forum, I'd like to share some important information with all UAW members about the runoff election. The runoff follows last year's UAW election and includes races for international president, international vice president, and Region 9 director. Distribution of the ballots for the runoff began earlier today, January 12th. The deadline to return these ballots is February 28th, 2023, and the vote count will start on March 1st. If you haven't received a ballot by January 19th and believe you are eligible to vote, you may request a ballot by going to uawvote.com or calling 855-433-8683. I will repeat, 855-433-8683. More information about the runoff election is available on the Monitor's website, www.uamonitor.com/elections, and on the UAW's website, uaw.org 2022 IEB elections. I'd now like to turn to the rules for tonight's forum, which were shared with the candidates and are available on the Monitor's website. As you can see, only the candidates, myself, and the timekeeper appear on screen, and the comment and chat functionality mode have been disabled. Over the past week, UAW members have sent the Monitor's hotline dozens of questions for tonight's forum. To start out, each candidate will have 3 minutes to make an opening statement. The order of these opening statements was randomly determined by the Monitor. After opening statements, I'll begin directing questions to the two candidates. I decided on these questions independent of both the UAW and the Monitor and of anybody else. I did, however, consider and include questions that UAW members submitted to the Monitor's hotline. The candidate to whom a question is addressed will have up to 2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will then have up to a minute to address the response, the original question, or both. Finally, the candidate to whom the question was originally posed will have up to 30 seconds for rebuttal. I have discretion to grant a candidate additional time. When not speaking, all candidates must mute their microphones. Candidates are prohibited from interrupting other speakers and are only permitted to unmute when I indicate it is their turn to speak. A timekeeper will display the remaining time available for candidates to speak. Once a candidate runs out of time, I will alert them that they must wrap up within 10 seconds. After that, the candidate's microphone will be muted. After we complete the question and answer segment, each candidate will have the opportunity to present a 3-minute closing statement. We're looking forward to having a thoughtful discussion about issues of relevance to the UAW membership. To do that, it's important that candidates follow the timing rules, be respectful, and not interrupt or speak over each other. If folks are unable to do that, I may limit or suspend a candidate's speaking time to maintain order. I should note that as moderator, I'm committed to being scrupulously neutral as between the candidates tonight, not taking sides or showing preferences. As determined by lot, the Monitor's office says the speaking order for opening and closing statements shall be Sean Fain first and then Ray Curry second. Sean Fain will now give the first opening statement for up to 3 minutes.
Okay, I'd like to thank the Monitor and Mr. Greenhouse for moderating and our members watching. I'd like to start by recognizing our members at the University of California and the New School in New York for taking on their employers. Also like to recognize our members on strike at EPS, at HarperCollins Publishing, and our courageous members at Case New Holland. who after 8 months rejected a final offer from the company. The energy and the will from our members to not settle for less gives me confidence about the future of our union. For over 20 years, I've served and negotiated for our membership at every level of this union. At the local level, I was elected 5 terms as committeeman and shop chair. I spent 10 years on international staff. I don't forget where I come from. I come from working class roots. 3 of my 4 grandparents were GM and Chrysler retirees, and I don't forget enduring layoffs. I don't forget being on WIC to get formula and diapers for my firstborn daughter. As a single parent, I don't forget living paycheck to paycheck, doing the best I could to provide for my family, and I don't forget the membership of our union. My opponent and that caucus, on the other hand, have forgotten where they come from, and they've forgotten the membership. They've forgotten about temps and workers who are suffering under the tier system, many members who are working the exact same job for less money and benefits. They've forgotten about members at plants that are closing or being idled. While we have plant closing moratoriums in our agreements, we see plants continue to close in the best of times with zero action from our top leaders. My opponent's forgotten about our young members who are suffering because of inflation and overworked with unfair work schedules. The caucus has missed 2 great opportunities to win cost of living back, and our members are paying the price. They've forgotten about retirees. Retirees are the reason we're all here today, and it's unacceptable that we haven't negotiated increases for retirees in over 15 years, and it's unacceptable that my opponent didn't want retirees to vote in this election. My opponent's forgotten about workers in IPS and other sectors that have incredibly low pay, where numerous workers on the campaign trail have told me they're treated like second-class citizens. They've forgotten about future members of our union by refusing to take action to address the shift to electric vehicles. Automakers have announced joint venture after joint venture, but we've seen zero plan and zero action to lock down this work under our master agreements. New workers at these plants are going to suffer with inferior agreements, and our current members may be left with nowhere to go. The membership has been forgotten because my opponent subscribes to a company union philosophy. This has resulted in decades of concessions as our memberships declined from over 1 million members to 390,000. We need a change in perspective. We need leadership with a will to fight and with real plans to take on our employers strategically. It's time we put corporate America on notice that our members deserve their fair share, and we're coming for it. The one-sided affair of company unionism is done. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Curry.
Good evening, UAW members. And thank you, Mr. Greenhouse, and thank you, Monitor, for hosting this event. UAW members, it's great to be here with you this evening, and thank you for joining in. Whether you're active, whether you're retired, whether you're in the continental United States, Providence in Canada, or on the island of Puerto Rico, it's great that you're here. I'm Ray Curry, your international president, one who's continued to serve on behalf of all the retired and active members each and every day. I've been leading that charge and fighting for members from when I left the military to the shop floor to joining the international staff. My whole key goal in life has continued and always will be about vision, integrity, and I bring a wealth of experience to continue serving our membership. You know, while my opponent likes to talk about great experience and great opportunities, I have actually been doing the work. I've actually been out on the lines with our members in multiple sectors: heavy truck, IPS, TOP, state employees, and all each and every day, not just one sector. It's a key piece that we've got to remember. Every one of our sectors of membership count. It's a key piece for all of us. While I was doing the work out on the picket lines, while I was doing the work fighting with employers, when I was doing the work standing with employers, my opponent was sitting behind a desk in a training center. Tell me, what location did he strike from that training center? None of that could have taken place, but I've stood with our membership, and I'll continue to stand with our membership with a key goal. I've been leading the reforms since 2019 on behalf of our membership and our International Executive Board, with a goal and a key plan of working each and every day. Today, I even had the opportunity to go through the reforms and policies that have been enacted since 2019 with our current International Executive Board, while my opponent, again, was asleep at the wheel at the training center. There's no inaction that can take place at that center. And my opponent has clearly made a point of stressing the fact that he is a reformer. The reforms that were led by the International Union were led by myself and other International Executive Board members, starting while I served as Secretary Treasurer. A key piece that each and every one of us was remember. Those reforms are key and why we've made major changes on behalf of our membership. I'll stand each and every day to fight another battle for our membership and to make sure another generation of members, a past generation of membership, and our current generation of membership is respected each and every day in their workplace by the employers that we have to deal with to bring home the best agreements that can stand for them for another generation to come. Thank you.
Thank you both. First question for Mr. Curry. I begin with a question submitted by a UAW member about a hot topic. Quote, automakers have publicly announced that electric vehicle production will require 30% less labor per unit, which means that if policies and practices don't change, tens of thousands of auto workers will be laid off as the electric vehicle transition continues. What are your plans for protecting jobs and offsetting these job losses? Will you fight for a shorter work week and for the same pay for 30 hours work at 40 hours pay? Another UAW member asked, related, how will you ensure that electric vehicle jobs are good paying jobs on par with big three pay and benefits? 2 minutes.
The whole goal on that will be we will fight for those. Those jobs are our jobs. And when we talk about electric vehicles, we're talking about a number of different things. We're talking about current products that have been announced, whether they were announced with GM, with the Lyric down in Spring Hill, Tennessee, or an F-150 Lightning in the Rouge and other locations, or if it was a plug-in hybrid with regard to the Jeep products for Stellantis. Each and every one of those products are currently going inside of UAW represented facilities. We will also stand to fight for the locations that have been announced with regard to joint ventures. The OEMs made it very clear that those were the powertrains of the future. We will stand with our members to secure that work at powertrain rates for our membership. It's key that we remember we set the standard in each and every one of those industries, and we've got to protect the work of the future. Every employer has also announced that we can't move forward without bringing everyone along. We want every one of our members who are current UAW members and future UAW members to have a position in this evolving transformation to electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, and all vehicles that will be part of that sector. But that sector is not just happening in auto. That sector is currently happening also in auto, ag, heavy truck, and other sectors. It's a key piece that we've got to remember that the electric transformation is not just taking place in one sector. There's a reason that they call it the big three. It's not one sector that my opponent actually is capable of representing. This is a piece that we've got to represent all sectors of our membership, and I plan on standing on behalf of them each and every day to fight and make sure that we move accordingly into the next generation of vehicles with UAW members building the auto industry no different than they did in the early 30s, 87 years ago when the UAW was founded.
Thank you. Mr. Fain, you have up to a minute to respond.
So we can't continue on the current course, like I said, of aiming low, settling lower. President Curry is going to tell you that EV transition is under control, but nothing can be further from the truth. Right now, we're operating on several different playbooks. With Stellantis and Kokomo or GM in Lordstown, companies are forming joint ventures that lower our standards. Ford's investing over $11 billion in work in Kentucky and Tennessee, states that are hostile to organized labor. The work's got to be brought under our master agreements, but what we're seeing from Curry is too little, too late. Organizing a joint venture after the fact, like they did at Altium, leaves us open to worse wages and worse benefits, and it leaves current workers in combustible plants with nowhere to go if their plants close. So when the first battery plant joint venture was announced, our leaders should have taken action and set the tone that we're not playing around with the members' futures. My opponent said in the last debate, you can't organize these places that are fields and don't have any employees, and that's just false. We've done it before. Where I'm from in Indiana, back in the 90s, we struck for work that had not been announced yet, but the corporation intended to move elsewhere. And the strike resulted in a historic investment from the company that led to 2 new plants.
Time. Mr. Curry, you can respond for 30 seconds if you like.
I'd say my opponent has no history of striking any employer. He has no history of understanding what the transformation is that's taking place. He has no interest in understanding what the current industry is that's moving forward with regard to EVs. I'm actually sitting at the table with those employers and those members, and our members are securing their locations. Our members are securing products for the future. We're not being ignored. Our voice is being heard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question for Mr. Fain. You're running for the UAW's top position, overseeing bargaining at dozens of companies. Several rank and file members have questioned whether you have enough bargaining experience, and several have questioned whether your experience bargaining at Stellantis has prepared you, if elected, to oversee bargaining in a much broader landscape at many other companies, plus in the public sector. How can you assure UAW members that you have the needed experience?
So my opponent likes to pretend that they have some grand plan for bargaining in Big Three and other sectors, but the bottom line, while my opponent's been serving on the IAB, GM workers went on strike. My plan, and the bottom line, when they went on that strike, there really wasn't a strategic plan involved in that other than to see the members hurt, bottom line. So my plan for Big Three bargaining has 5 points. And when we get to that, it ties it all together. We need to understand that our power comes from the membership, number one. We need to take action with the membership before negotiations. By taking action early, we put pressure on the companies. We have to unify ourselves around our demands, which makes us more powerful and ready to act. We have to present the whipsawing. Right now, the caucus leaves locals to fend for themselves. We got to get back to the old practice of settling agreements beforehand. We got to hit companies where they hurt. We got to find those soft points. We've got to have a more bottom-up approach. But, we have to communicate with the membership. But all of this, talk of sectors and everything else, it's all just a master scheme to divide the membership. And the bottom line is, this isn't what we're about. No matter what sector you're in, we form strategies and we put the plan in place. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Curry, you have a minute to respond.
As it took place in the last reform, my opponent's making it clear again. He's saying bargaining's bargaining, and bargaining's not bargaining. It starts well before you go to the table, and experience does matter. I've proven myself in multiple times in multiple sectors of this organization and stood for this membership. We do have a plan. We've been executing a plan, and our plan has been working, and our membership has been successful. He seems to ignore the number of agreements that are out there. He seems to ignore the product announcements and job security provisions that have been introduced at a number of locations, and our members are successful in multiple sectors. He forgets to acknowledge the fact that beyond the auto, there's still multiple sectors, and our union was built with a history of representing multiple sectors. And that's why over 87 plus years, we've stood for those members in every one of those sectors, and we'll stand for those active members and those retired members who came from those sectors each and every day as we move forward. That's part of a vision. That's part of what experience truly brings each and every day.
Mr. Fain, you have 30 seconds to rebut.
So, as trying to claim he's the only one that knows anything about a diverse union, look at heavy truck. The last debate, he claimed they eliminated tiers. If that was true, why did they vote it down 3 times? And then they still have a 6-year progression to top pay. Look at our sisters and brothers at C&H striking in Ag Imp. They came to convention asking for $500 a week strike pay, only to have Curry and the caucus reverse it and take the money back. Talk to members in higher ed that say once they get organized and win their first contract, they're left to fend for themselves. Look at IPS. My last campaign trip, I talked to members at plants that they wanted to fight for a better contract, but the national wouldn't support them on going on strike.
Time.
There's a common theme here of neglect.
Next question. A question for both of you, but I will first direct this to Mr. Curry. If you win a full 4-year term, do you think you would be able to work smoothly with the Secretary Treasurer, several UAW vice presidents, and others from Mr. Fain's slate who have already been elected in the first round? How will you coordinate and work with them?
Greenhouse, I'm actually working with them right now. As the elected UAW president, I'm getting that opportunity each and every day. I sat with them today at an officer's table in our IAB onboarding to talk about the current policies and other decisions and things that were enacted since 2019. I will be working with each and every one of them. I was also fortunate enough on December the 12th to swear each and every one of them as the international president. And I'll continue to work with them. We've got a great ongoing relationship at this point. The secretary and treasurer and the president historically for this organization work hand in hand each and every day. I look forward to working with Secretary Mock. I look forward to working with Vice President Booth, Vice President Boyer, and all of the entire International Executive Board, because teamwork is what makes it happen. We're building a team right now with that current International Executive Board. We're doing the work right now for our membership. We're addressing issues right now in the workspace. While we were doing this today, my opponent was sitting behind the desk at the training center. He wasn't discussing anything about employers. He wasn't discussing anything about multiple sectors. He wasn't meeting with an IPS member at that training center. He was sitting there dealing with one thing, work from Stellantis, something that he's forgotten, that the membership is graded in one sector and that the membership is graded in one person. A key piece that we've all got to remember. Experience, again, matters in this process and is so key to what takes place. He also keeps talking about a caucus, the very caucus that from 2010 until 2022, he actually belonged to until he walked out of that caucus meeting in April of 22 this year. He was a member of the administrative caucus, something that my opponent seems to keep forgetting about.
Time. Mr. Fain, you've up to a minute. And, how will you work smoothly with members of Mr. Curry's slate who've been elected?
So bottom line, and I'm glad he brought several things up here, but 62% of this membership has said they want change. And, Secretary Treasurer brought up, it was a perfect person for the job, and it's going to be a seamless transition. The bottom line, no matter what sector you come from, no matter what caucus you came from, it doesn't matter. We have an obligation to the membership. The membership comes first. And that's the problem with this union and this top leadership for years. It's been a top-down organization rather than one that leads from the membership up. So, the other part of this, he wants to keep talking about, me sitting in a desk, me sitting in an office. You know what? Again, this is the first time in history. I'm sorry that I wasn't handpicked by the people at the top to put me in power, and I didn't play the game, call it what you want. Obviously, Ray Curry got along well with Dennis Williams and Gary Jones and all of them, as he was handpicked to be the Secretary Treasurer for Gary Jones.
Time.
I was never an insider, and that's the only endorsement meeting I've ever been invited to. So, as far as the caucus goes, leave it where you want.
Mr. Curry, you have 30 seconds if you want to respond. You don't have to.
Thank you, Steve. Again, my opponent now wants to discount caucuses when he's talked about caucuses for a very long time during this election cycle. It's a piece that we've got to remember. And yes, you were a participant in the administrative caucus, a piece that you seem to have forgotten about. In 2010 until 2022, and you notice that the corruption case ended in 2018. There was never a chance, despite that you raising vice presidents that you opposed, never at one time did you stand in opposition and call out the bullshit corruption that took place. You never called it out.
Time.
Can I reply to that?
Yes.
So again, bottom line, to say I've never called it out, I have called it out. I've been chastised by vice presidents, by presidents. And the bottom line, when you talk about, again, we get back to this, it's handpicked. You guys handpick who you want. You've been part of the problem, not part of the solution. To sit there and claim that you're a reformist now and you're all about change, it's a complete joke.
Next question. Next question, Mr. Fain. By some estimates, about 20% of all UAW members are academic workers at universities and colleges. A two-part question. What do you think should be done to assure that academic workers have adequate voice and power within the UAW? Second, the UAW's official name is the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Workers. Do you think the name should be changed to the United Automobile, Aerospace, Agricultural, and Academic Workers?
Changing the name. I mean, we're such a diverse union already. I mean, I would have no issue. I mean, I would leave that to the membership. Again, this is the membership's union. It's not my union. It's really not my place. I would leave that, as an issue to be submitted to convention for future discussions. As far as supporting our higher ed workers and those, I mean, in talking to a lot of them on the campaign trail, I mean, they're frustrated with, the lack of support. Some of them would like to see more resources in organizing. Some would, like to see more training. So there, the bottom line is, as leaders, we have to listen and we have to respond. We have to respect the different sectors. Every sector has their nuances, their different issues, and any good leader isn't going to claim to have all the answers and know it all. But one thing I have pledged to do is form, committees and councils made up of workers from the respective areas, listen to their issues, and react to it. We have to act on their behalf. That's the responsibility of leadership.
Mr. Curry?
Steve, I've had the opportunity to meet with our higher ed members, and a key piece that's supporting their issues and understanding their issues. I actually completed an undergraduate degree during the time being employed. I also completed an MBA degree. That's something that our higher ed students have embraced and understood, that during working hours and working time, whether it was in a plant and off shifts or whether it was after hours, once I was on staff, they understood that work. And I understand the sacrifices, the struggles, the issues with housing, the issues with fair pricing, the issues with salaries. And it's a key piece that we've got to make sure that we embrace. Those universities are going to continue to grow. It's a pathway for the future, not always for everyone, but it is a pathway for some. And that sector of our membership is growing by many leaps and bounds. We want to hear their voice. We want to take the stands when necessary. We want to be able to authorize strikes when necessary. And we want to be able to support their actions to be able to move forward. It's a key piece for them each and every day.
Thank you, Tom. Mr. Fain?
Um,
I'll go to the next question. This is for Mr. Curry. The UAW has recently been through one of its worst scandals in its history, with a dozen former senior officials, including 2 former UAW presidents, convicted of embezzling more than $1 million in union funds for luxury travel and other lavish personal expenses. What do you think the UAW should have done to prevent all that corruption? One UAW member asks, what strides have you made as president to reform the UAW? Another UAW member submitted this question to the hotline. What do you say to members who think the administration caucus can't be trusted because of the history of corruption?
Steve, I say to those members, I'm just as mad as they are. Those members have expressed their frustration about a number of things that have taken place. These things took place between the years of 2010 and 2018. In 2019, I was part of the reform efforts that removed those individuals from our UAW. They're no longer members of our UAW. We began the process while I was Secretary Treasurer of leading reforms, top to bottom reviews, putting things in place so that this would never happen again. It's a key piece that we've got to continue moving on. And I've continued to do that as president, as part of transparency, as part of communications. It's a piece that's been led, whether it was putting and establishing compliance officers, internal audits, bringing in a new external auditor, doing a top to bottom review with a major accounting firm. All those things now are key to what we've been doing and moving forward. I am part of the reform. My opponent talks about being a reformer, but my opponent has not written the first policy that's been enacted in the UAW. He's not been part of those discussions. He can raise those points each and every day, but they're not part of the change that's taking place. We've adopted change, and my opponent is actually part of the understanding the new rules that are out there. We are advocating for the membership while others are sitting on the couch and playing Monday morning quarterback on different things and different discussions about what's actually happening. We're doing the real work. We're doing the heavy lift. And as a result of it, a number of experts, including our ethics officer, has applauded the efforts of our International Executive Board, the policies, the reforms, and other things that have taken place. They're the key to our survival, that we not take steps backwards to what happened in 2010 to 2018. We've got to move forward, and that experience is what's going to count.
Mr. Fain.
So like he likes to talk about this experience and he wants to talk about 2010 forward. Let's talk about 2014 forward when President Curry was on the IEB. He's been an IEB member for 8 years. He was on the IEB when they agreed to build Dennis Williams a retirement home at Black Lake. As president, his priority last year, while plants were being closed and products, hanging out there trying to get it, he was busy orchestrating pensions for all international staff. He was busy coming up with $20,000 early retirement bonuses for all the international staff. So he was busy as president violating the Constitution when it came to hiring new staff under the guise of saying it's under special jobs, which the bottom line was, it was just to take care of family members of IEB members and political favors. So we can claim it's been cleaned up. I mean, he forgets, he wants to talk about the monitor said we're heading in the right direction. The monitor had to take him before the Department of Justice in order to get them to comply with opening the doors to let the monitor have access to things that are going on. So the bottom line is they were still concealing corruption, even under his watch.
Time. Mr. Curry, you have up to 30 seconds to respond.
My opponent refuses and fails to read the monitor's report to its conclusion. The monitor acknowledges the great work that was done. The monitor acknowledges that it wasn't the president that was actually doing any of the specific things that he's alleging. And again, we're moving forward. We're doing great things on behalf of the membership. And my opponent fails now to acknowledge the reforms that are taking place and are key to our survival. He wants to claim being a reformer, but he's been sitting on the sidelines.
Time. Thank you. A question for Mr. Fain. A few minutes ago, you criticized Mr. Curry and the UAW's leadership for not winning higher pensions for retirees. How do you plan to win higher pensions for UAW retirees, especially if GM, Ford, and Stellantis resist? I add to this a question from a UAW member, and I quote, Mr. Fain, you have made promises to the retirees to try to negotiate increases to pensions. Doesn't that take away from the active membership and the gains they would receive at the bargaining table? How can you do this when the companies are not at all required to negotiate with the union on permissive subjects of bargaining like pensions and retirees?
So we can do it the same way we always have. I mean, people forget, and it's odd that, with this lose-lose mentality that Curry and his slate keep talking about that we can't do. No, we can. We've done it before. We've negotiated for retirees. We've negotiated for increases. And the bottom line is we're not going to separate and say, they're trying to frame the question as if retirees matter more than current workers or new workers matter more than retirees. We're all in this together. We have to fight the battle together. We have to stand up for one another. The retirees stood up for us to have jobs that we have now, and we can't forget that. And the bottom line is, in the last 15 years, and especially the last 10, when these companies have had rolling in billions in profits, there's no excuse that we couldn't have addressed things like cost of living adjustments for retirees. And when they say you can't bargain for them, you can. There are ways to bargain for retirees, just as there are ways to bargain for other things that are permissive subjects. So the bottom line, we'll have a mentality where we're going to go in there that we can do something rather than coming up with 1,000 reasons why we can't.
Thank you. Mr. Curry.
We always have the opportunity to discuss issues for retirees. We have the ability to submit proposals and have those discussions with the employer, permissive or not. Those items always stay on the table during our discussions, and we have been successful in locations. There have been improvements in pension. There have been improvements in retiree bonuses in a number of different sectors. And the one piece that my opponent seems to keep referencing is these things that are taking place, and they're taking place in a vacuum. I've been at the table across, meeting with employers, meeting with the memberships, meeting with the active and retired to discuss their issues prior to bargaining, and then executing those issues. And when those issues were not successful, we have hit the street. We have taken the necessary strikes. And when it was not successful, we wanted to make sure that the membership's voice is always heard, whether it took 1 vote, 2 votes, or 3 votes. A membership's voice being heard is the key piece that takes place each and every day as part of collective bargaining, when we don't shove an agreement down their throat.
Mr. Fain, do you want to rebut for 30 seconds?
Well, it's interesting he brings up talking about shoving agreements down their throats, but I mean, I've seen it. I've been at the bargaining table too. And the issue is, you know, this system of the companies delaying things and stalling it out so everything goes to the top table with the president and the VPs and the IAB members is exactly what we get a result of. And then when they come down with a deal, they tell the negotiators, here's your deal. And when, just as in 2019, when negotiators said they wouldn't accept it, the president told the negotiators, okay, we'll take it from here. You can all go home now. That's not a solution. And that's wrong. And that is cramming it down our throats. And that happened just 4 years ago. So that's the reality of what we deal with. And we can do better.
A question for Mr. Curry. Back in 2017, the New York Times ran several damning articles about sexual harassment against women at 2 Ford plants in Chicago. The article criticized both the company and the union for not doing nearly enough to help these women. What do you think the UAW should do to ensure that women UAW members have a strong voice within the union? Second, what more do you think the union needs to do to protect members against sexual harassment and discrimination in workplaces across the US and in the UAW itself?
Steve, we've got to protect all members. Women have a strong history in our union. When you look back at what took place with regard to the emergency brigade, women have taken a huge stand for many years with regard to UAW. There were the Rosita Rivers in the 40s during World War II. They fought and took a huge stand for each and every one of us. And we've got a responsibility to make sure that we protect them in the workplace, but we also protect every member in the workplace. We've got a number of things in place that clearly that situation was a one-off situation that has since been addressed in that location in Chicago that you referenced. And there's ways to continue to address and be able to be advocates for working men and women in the workplace. We've got to protect each and every one. And we also have to protect them not only from the employers, we also have to make sure that they're working in safe conditions each and every day. It's an important piece as we move forward. And that's what we're going to continue to do. We have a stand that we've taken for advocacy for a number of years, whether it was discrimination practices, whether it was civil rights, all other issues. We have been a huge voice inside of advocating and protecting workspace and making sure that individuals were able to function each and every day in a safe environment. It's a key piece that we've got to continue doing.
Thank you. Mr. Fain.
Well, this is one area where President Curry and I are going to agree on. Bottom line, we shouldn't have to fight the companies to provide sexual harassment and diversity training. We do sometimes. But we need the companies to take these issues as seriously as they do manufacturing process training. We have to involve women more in leadership roles, and that's why it's important when we put together our slate of candidates to have a highly qualified woman in one of the top positions of the leadership, the Secretary Treasurer. We have to train up women for leadership roles. We need to put more resources on staff-wise and financially to address women's issues. Issues I've heard about, of health plans covering drugs like Viagra for men, but when it comes to women's reproductive issues, it's a different story. So I know last contract we negotiated for breast pumping stations and plants, but even there, those issues need tweaking because there were issues with management not allowing time on things like that. So I've been a part of negotiating language for apprenticeships, which has resulted in more women opportunities for women. And we can do more, and we will do more. And that's, again, I'm not going to disagree with Ray on that. I think we both see things the same way there.
Thank you. Next question. So the Monitor's Hotline received a question from Terry Dittis, who recently stepped down as a UAW vice president and is head of the union's GM department. He sent in this question for both candidates, and I'll first direct it to Mr. Fain. Quote, these elections cost a lot of money with flyers, mailings, videos, and travel. Did either of you receive any money from outside of active and retired UAW members for this campaign? If so, specifically, how much money and from what person or persons or groups did you receive money from? Then a rank and file member added this related question. If you are taking money from outside individuals or groups, why should the membership believe that you will put the membership's best interest ahead of your donors' best interests?
So first off, I've never hid the fact that we've taken money from friends, family, grassroots supporters of the labor movement. A lot of those people, that are labor activists realize the importance of a strong UAW, of a fighting UAW. A lot of people care about the UAW, and that's a good thing. Unlike Terry Dittis, who asked a question in his caucus, which got us into this mess by taking money from companies. I would never accept money from companies. So let's make it clear that's not what we're doing. All of our contributions are reported to the Monitor per the rules, and the other side can view our reports. So if my opponent felt like I was violating a rule, they could make a complaint to the Monitor, but to my knowledge, they haven't. So this is all for show. What I find sad about this is that my opponents have been campaigning on the members' dime, visiting locals and plants, and they haven't been to these plants in years, and they call it union business. They're also able to go to their army of international staff, and they pressure them to donate to the flower funds. And so they utilize those flower funds as long as the intent's made known. So, unfortunately, the Monitor took a position that that was okay, but I think the membership sees it for what it is. And, it's an unfair system, but all this, it's just politics, and it's another desperate attempt from their slate to try and distract members from the real issue, and that's the inaction of the top leadership.
Mr. Curry, you have a minute to respond.
My opponent has expressed that he's accepted money from outside groups. We've not accepted money from any outside groups. We believe this election is about the retired members of the UAW and the active members of the UAW. And we've only received donations from the active and retired. We have not utilized flower funds. If my opponent reads the rules, flower funds were actually going to be protracted or in a prorated amount, and we chose not to use them. So we've not used them. We've only used actual donations from active and retired members on our trips. We've actually, when we visited locations for official business, we've been on official business. When we've chosen to take our vacation to go visit with members in other locations and for events, that's what we've done. We've actually been on vacation during those times. That's a key piece that he's got to remember, but he seems to keep forgetting. Just as much as he talks about corruption, taking money from outside groups is also corruption.
Thank you. Mr. Fain, you have 30 seconds if you'd like to add, rebut.
We're not taking money from outside groups. So, bottom line, and claim what you want as far as, when you're traveling under the guise of business. It's no secret. Many local leaders have called and talked about how the fact that, you guys have your meeting or you do your plant tour, and then you talk about politics. So you can deny it all you want, but these people aren't making this up. So.
Thank you. Question for Mr. Curry. Both you and Mr. Fain received less than 40% of the vote in the first round of voting. Here's a question from a rank and file member. Why do you think, Mr. Curry, that 62% of membership voted for candidates who campaigned against your record and against the administration caucus's record? What do you say to that 62% who voted for other candidates to persuade them that you should be elected to a new 4-year term?
Steve, this is the first time direct elections have taken place. There were actually 5 candidates that were in the race, and our members chose and had the right to vote. I believe that the one piece that we've got to remember I still gained 600 plus more votes than Sean Fain. That's a piece that's significant. Now we're in a head-to-head race, ballots being dropped today, and I am asking the membership to be sure to vote for the entire Carry Solidarity team that remains. I have been leading the reforms, and I want to continue doing that on behalf of the membership, active and retired, each and every day. It's a piece about where experience counts, experience matters, and we shouldn't take steps backwards. When you look at doing reform since 2019 to now, we're 4 years into a process, and the UAW is standing better on behalf of our membership as a result of it. It's a key piece that we've got to remember. And we are advocating and doing things in a better way. Experience does count. Experience counts in bargaining. Experience counts in every one of those sectors. The one piece that my opponent fails to tell anyone or fails to reference, whether you look at 2011, whether you look at 2015, or whether you look at 2019, my opponent has not led any type of bargaining in any sector. And most recently, the reason that my opponent is at a training center right now, actually working, is that he was removed from a bargaining position for failure to perform. So we need experience. We've got tough issues to deal with moving forward. We need to continue to make sure reforms are in place. We need to make sure that we've got experienced leadership representing this membership to its core values of over 87 years. It's important.
Thank you. Mr. Fain?
So first off, I mean, let's clear this up right immediately. I wasn't removed for failure to perform. I was removed because I wouldn't kiss the company's ass. So let's just be real. Our leadership, company union leadership, does not want leaders that take the company on. They want leaders that go in and agree with the companies and buddy up to them. That's the first lie. Secondly, you can play it any way you want as far as the results of this election. 62% of the people voted against the status quo. And the irony in this is now that President Kerry wants to talk about, the membership had the final say, he didn't want you to have the final say. He was against members having the right to vote in this election because he wants the same tired old system where they handpick their successors. That's why he's sitting where he is right now. So it's ironic for him to sit here now and claim all of a sudden he's a champion of reform and he's a champion of your right to vote when he doesn't want you to have it. So, he can play on this experience all he wants. The bottom line is, his own vice president candidate last time talked about, they want to sound prophetic. Good intentions don't get good agreements. Trying to believe you that only them and their slate have the skills and knowledge. But you know what? Good agreements don't mean anything if you don't have leadership that'll enforce it. And that's the problem.
Mr. Curry, you have 30 seconds to rebut.
Thank you, Steve. My opponent fails to, again, acknowledge the experience. I was elected as the Secretary Treasurer. I was elected as a regional director, and I was elected no different than what happened with Leonard Woodcock following the passing of Walter Reuther. I sit in the seat elected by the International Executive Board following the retirement of Roy Gamble. No different than what happened with Woodcock being elected by the International Executive Board when Walter Reuther passed. You've got to understand the Constitution. And again, Sean, experience counts and matters.
Well, I understand the Constitution, but the bottom line is you were elected by a convention system that basically the IEB controls. You know it, Ray. Let's be real. Where have you been? You know exactly what goes on. It's a controlled environment. The election is done before it ever happens, before the convention even happens. So claim that all you want.
Sean, did that take place in one of those caucus meetings that you attended?
No, the beauty of this is the membership has the final say.
Okay, new question. Thank you. Here's a question that the UAW member had for both of you, but I will direct it to Mr. Fain. Quote, both of you began your career in similar sized plants. Mr. Curry as an assembler, Mr. Fain as an electrician. You both rose through the ranks, landing high-level union positions, but unfortunately, and I quote, you both have worked within a corrupt system for many years. It has been 5 years since the first UAW official was indicted. What improvements have you made in your area of responsibility to reform this union? If you are elected or re-elected president, give an example of systemic changes you will make your priority. First, Mr. Fain.
So, I've worked actually at the training center where basically was ground zero for where the corruption initially started. That was first reported at Chrysler. We've put a whole new system of policies in place to ensure those things won't happen again. So that's one aspect of it. Thing is, we need leadership, that's willing to take real steps to be more transparent, to eliminate corruption and rebuild the trust of the membership. That's what's got to happen. Two things I think we can do right off the bat, I'd commit to publicly posting positions for all staff and appointments so we can hire and appoint the most qualified people. It was recommended by the monitor to do this. It just hasn't been implemented. Commit to telling the membership how much the strike fund's actually worth, the actual value of the fund, and see how your dues are being used. Definitely going to work with the new Secretary Treasurer that we make more financial information available and more transparent. And you can look at the monitor's third report. He likes to skip to the page 23 or whatever, but the first several pages where it explains he had to be lectured by the Department of Justice to get back on track. So I plan to be proactive. We can't afford to make mistakes and end up with our union being run by the federal government.
Mr. Curry.
We keep going back to this monitor's report and being lectured by the federal government. We actually volunteered for a meeting with the Department of Justice. Sean fails to mention that as part of that discussion because Sean was not part of the discussion. Sean also talks about things about improving things at the training center when he was not even involved in the bargaining that took place with regard to establishing our new Taft-Hartleys. It's a key piece that he keeps forgetting about his limited bargaining experience and what he's actually doing. I've been part of the reforms. I'll continue to be part of the reforms and transparency, and we will continue to increase and improve the monitor's recommendations. And we've done that. We've done that over the time period when we established reforms and policies since 2019, actually ahead of being assigned the federal monitor. We were already doing the reforms. Somehow this keeps getting missed, but my opponent seems to keep wanting to claim that he's a reformer, he's leading charges, and I keep asking him, show me the first policy that you enacted, show me the first policy that you drafted, and tell me what day were you in a meeting with the federal authorities to help improve this union.
Time. Mr. Fain, you have 30 seconds to rebut.
I've given judges actually tours and met with the federal judge. I've met with monitors. And actually, I find it funny you talk about bargaining Taft-Hartleys, and I wasn't a part of that language. You're damn right I wasn't, because if I was part of it, we wouldn't have given control to the companies with all the financial aspects and every other aspect of this. We damn near signed the whole thing over with the language that was agreed to. Should have never happened. That's a huge mistake. So
I'm going to ask one more, I think just one more round of questions before we go to closing statements, unless you're eager for lots more questions. Question for Mr. Curry. With inflation running around 8-9% last year, it's not surprising that many UAW members are demanding that the union get cost of living adjustments included in many future contracts, especially with the Detroit automakers. If elected, what would you do to get COLA restored in UAW contracts? And what will you do if the employers say, no way, COLAs are obsolete, a thing of the past? Will you support a strike if an employer rejects COLA?
We'll support a strike and authorize a strike at the time that the membership has made demands that have not been met with an employer. We have locations that have cost of living allowance in their agreements. COLA is not a thing of the past. And most recently, the John Deere agreement is a prime example of returning COLA to a cost of living agreement. That piece is in play. It exists in our aerospace locations. It exists in our defense location. It currently exists in a number of heavy truck locations. It's a piece that our members are voicing major concerns over. We'd like to see that improvement. We see it as an economic piece for investing in their futures, their stakes in their own communities, and it does bring something. It brings the ability to adjust on the dime what economic changes are taking place with regard to the country. We can advocate for that, we can fight for that, and we'll stand for that because a number of our members, again, we're setting a tone for our current collective bargaining convention that comes at the end of March. A number of these things have already been raised with members, and we expect that we're going to continue to hear them. And we will be taking those issues to the employer and to the bargaining table to address. It's a piece that's got to be addressed. And it's a key piece about economic power for all of our UAW members.
Thank you. Mr. Fain?
Yeah, I don't think we disagree on this. I mean, the bottom line, we have to, I mean, it's a necessity. I mean, you can't look at the situation now with rising cost everywhere, you know, and the situation our members are in. You know, we have to, another reason why we need to address tiers. But, you know, cost of living is vital, and what action we take, you know, we take the action that the membership directs us to do, and striking, if we have to do it, is where we have to go. And the companies have to realize they have an obligation to our members, and they've been fat with profits for over 10 years, and it's time we take them on.
A question for Mr. Fain. Last month, Stellantis announced bad news for the Jeep Cherokee plant in Belvidere, Illinois. It plans to indefinitely idle and lay off that plant's 1,350 workers beginning next month. That's the biggest plant closing since GM shut its Lordstown plant a few years ago. A UAW member sent in this question. Quote, currently there are plants with no new product allocated, such as the Stellantis Belvidere assembly plant, which is in danger of closing. What is your strategy to resist layoffs and plant closings? What would you do to save the Jeep Cherokee plant in Belvidere?
Well, the first thing I would do is, just in the case in the last 2 years, as President Curry's been in power, is I would have taken action. The sad reality with Belvidere specifically is simply this. These things aren't happening no matter where you go, whether it's Louisville Assembly, Belvidere, anywhere where they're looking for future product. The companies, these things aren't happening because sales are bad, the economy's weak, there's not product to give. There's product out there. They've awarded several products that were supposed to go to Belvidere, but our leadership took no action to ensure that it did. And now we're behind the 8 ball on it. So we've got to do better. And that's what we will do. I mean, we're going to fight for those jobs. We're going to identify the areas that need work, and we're going to take the companies on proactively instead of waiting for things to happen and reacting after the fact. We can't do that. Our members deserve better, and they can't afford this.
Mr. Curry?
Key piece that my opponent talks about is the possibilities of things. There's a number of actions that can be taken, and we're still fighting for Belvidere. We're fighting each and every day. We're working with the governor that's in that state. We'll work with federal and state other elected officials to ensure that there's a product for that facility. I took to the floor of the Detroit Auto Show the efforts and calls of the Belvidere members. When I met with Carlos Tavares and President Biden on the floor of the show and acknowledged that the future product of that location had already slipped to Mexico. The next generation of that Cherokee vehicle is being built in Mexico. We believe that that's an injustice for any type of American manufacturing to slip out of this country. I will continue to fight, whether it's with the president, whether it's with Carlos Tavares of Stellantis, whether it's meeting with Secretary Granholm of the Energy. We will get a product commitment for the future of the Belvidere workers. That plant will survive.
Well, I'm glad he took action by talking to Tavares at an auto show, but you know what? I think our members deserve action on the ground where we actually secure product.
Thank you. So we've been going on for about an hour. Time for closing statements. Each of you can make a 3-minute closing statement. And first, Mr. Fain, and then Mr. Curry.
Thank you. So this election is not about me. It's about the members of the UAW. This is your opportunity to change the course of our union. A few months ago, for the first time in our history, every member was able to cast a ballot to determine who will lead this union and how they're going to lead it. Initial results have shown the membership's ready for change and ready for leadership that's willing to fight to protect your job security. 62% of the voters in the presidential race voted against Ray Curry and the status quo. We need to change the culture and truly reform our union. Curry claims now that he's a reformer. Well, let's look at his 2 years as president. While Romeo Engine Plant, Trenton Engine, Belvedere Assembly, and several other plants are on life support, Curry's priorities were rewarding pensions for staff in May of 2022, giving $20,000 retirement bonuses for staff. He fought against one member, one vote, and the membership being able to vote for our top leadership to keep a convention system that they control the outcome. He pushed delegates for a reversal of $500 strike pay, hurting our brothers and sisters out there manning the picket lines, especially those at CNH. In heavy truck, the Volvo contract was voted down by the members 3 times before they addressed their demands. In Ag Imp, at Deere, was voted down twice before they addressed their demands. He violated the Constitution by hiring staff reps who weren't UAW members, not for specialty jobs, but to hire family members of the IEB, and also as political favors. But he was cited by the Monitor for continuing to conceal corruption at the ranks at the top, and he was taken before the Department of Justice and forced to agree to a reboot. So tell me, what the hell does any of this have to do with putting the needs of the membership first? This is our generation's defining moment, and this is our shot to take back our union and put the membership back in control. Remember this when you go to mark your ballot. Ray Curry doesn't want you to have the right to mark that ballot. So here's the options. You can elect President Curry and expect more of the same top-down IEB first mentality and the company union philosophy, or continue on a course of complacency and inaction while the plants continue to close and our members in IPS and other sectors struggle to get by, living paycheck to paycheck, trying to stay above the poverty line, while we continue to fall further behind in EV and our leadership continues to aim low and settle lower. Or you can finish the job of voting for change so together we can abandon the company union philosophy and shift the power and control of our union back in the hands of the membership and take action and get back to strategically fighting for our livelihoods and the working class. Thank you for taking the time to listen.
Mr. Curry.
Brothers and sisters, good evening again. Thank you for joining in to be able to watch this forum. Whether you're watching it live tonight or if you're watching it at a future date. The key piece that we've all got to remember in this total process is we've got to be able to move the UAW forward. I've been an advocate and a leader of change. I've been that advocate and leader of reform. My opponent often talks about what's taking place and what's actually happening when I'm actually doing the work every day. I've done the work every day. I had the true honor of serving our country, and it's been an also greater honor of serving our membership each and every day. Whether it was on the floor of my plant and home in Mount Holly, North Carolina, when I started off as a truck assembler, or whether it was serving as an assistant director or director in a region elected by the delegates of that region, and then elected nationally by delegates as a secretary treasurer. I support the membership's voice being heard. I support our retirees' voice being heard. I've led the charge for our active and retired. I've led the charge when we've had the strike, when we struck Johnson Controls as an IPS plant so our voice could be heard for seat builders. I've stood with members of defense when they've been on a strike. I've stood with the auto workers that have been on strike, and I've stood with heavy truck workers to make sure that their voice was heard, regardless of the number of times it took to get an agreement. The key piece that comes out of that was the success that occurred in that conclusion of bargaining and the membership's voice being heard. A piece that keeps happening and resonating with my opponent is having a voice in opposition to things, actually doing something about it. I'm actually doing the work and leading change each and every day. My opponent has been sitting behind the doors of a training center. He's not bargaining for IPS. He doesn't know the provisions of state employee agreements. He doesn't even care and understand about what's taking place and the protective conditions of our nurses that we represent. He's also forgot about our members in gaming, heavy truck, auto, and multiple sectors. There's a reason why this international grew for so many years, over the 87-year history of the organization. We welcome multiple sectors. We represented multiple sectors, and we stood with those sectors in the darkest days and in the days of glory. We can and we will continue to be successful. And this union will continue to grow and continue to reform and make the change. I ask the members across the country, in the US, on the island of Puerto Rico, and a province of Canada, for your vote one more time to complete the process that's taking place. We were ahead by 600 plus against Mr. Fain in the last one, and we'll complete the task of 50% plus to win this election. But I need your vote. I need your support so reform can continue. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we conclude tonight's candidate forum. A video recording of this forum will be available on the UAW's website and on the Monitor's website. I thank the two candidates for answering these questions. I congratulate the two of you for doing a good job fighting your corner. I thank the Monitor's office and the union for sponsoring this event. And lastly, I thank all of you UAW members who've been watching for caring about the future of the union and its members. Good night, everybody, and good luck.